The sun was setting over the hills of Sonoma Valley as Miguel Ramirez looked at the clock on the wall. 8:30 p.m. Another 12-hour day at Garcia's auto shop was finally ending. His back ached, his hands were rough and stained with grease, and all he wanted was a hot shower in his bed. Just another day, he thought to himself as he wiped his tools clean. At 34, Miguel had spent more than half his life fixing engines and broken machinery. The locals knew him as the guy who could fix almost anything with an engine or moving parts. The small town didn't offer much in terms of pay. What Miguel earned was just enough to cover the rent for his one-bedroom apartment and help with his mother's medicine. Rosa Ramirez had diabetes, and those pills weren't cheap. But no matter how tired he was or how little money was in his pocket, Miguel never complained. His father had taught him that honest work was something to be proud of, and he lived by those words every day. Time to close up, he muttered to himself, gathering his personal tools and putting them in his worn-out toolbox. The metal case had been his father's, and Miguel treasured it even though the red paint was chipped and one of the hinges was loose. Just as he was turning the key in the lock, he heard the rumble of an engine and the crunch of tires on gravel. Miguel looked over his shoulder and saw a dusty blue pickup truck pulling into the lot. The engine made a high-pitched whining noise that told him something wasn't right with it. "We're closed," he was about to say, but the words died in his throat. When the driver's door opened, a young woman jumped out, her boots landing in the gravel with a crunch. She was wearing mud-splattered jeans and a faded blue flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up to her elbows. Her brown hair was tied back in a messy ponytail, and there was a smudge of dirt on her cheek. She looked worried and a bit frantic. "I know you're closing," she said, walking quickly toward him. "And I'm really sorry to bother you, but I'm in a bit of an emergency." Miguel's hand remained on the key. He was tired, so tired, and his mother would be waiting for him to bring home dinner. "What's the problem?" he asked anyway, because that's the kind of person he was. "I'm Eliza," she said, extending a hand. He noticed her nails were short and practical, her palm calloused, not what he expected from her appearance. "My water pump broke down at the farm. The new section I just planted will die without water tonight." Miguel knew what that meant. In farming, especially with grapes, losing a season's new plants was like throwing away a year's work and investment. "Have you tried calling Tom at the hardware store? He sometimes helps with pumps," Miguel suggested, still hoping to get home. Eliza shook her head. "Already tried. He's away at his daughter's wedding in Oregon." "And Roy? Out fishing for the four weekend." Miguel sighed. He could see the genuine worry in her eyes. Those were the eyes of someone who had worked hard and was watching it all slip away. "What kind of pump is it?" he asked, already knowing he was going to help. Her face brightened with hope. "It's an older model, a Johnston X200. I tried fixing it myself, but something's wrong with the impeller assembly, I think." Miguel raised, his eyebrows impressed that she knew the parts by name. Most people just said the thing that spins or the noisy bit. "I can take a look," he said, pocketing the shop keys. "But I can't promise anything." Eliza's smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. "Thank you. I can pay whatever your rate is plus extra for the after-hours call." Miguel nodded and pointed to his old Chevy sedan. "I'll follow you in my car." 20 minutes later, they were driving down a dirt road between rows of young grapevines. The property wasn't what Miguel had expected. It wasn't one of the fancy wineries that tourists visited with stone buildings and tasting rooms. This place looked like a working farm, modest, practical, and clearly tended with care rather than for show. Eliza parked next to a small shed and jumped out, leading Miguel to a pump house near a pond. When she opened the door and switched on the light, he could see the problem immediately. The old pump was leaking from several places, and when Eliza tried to turn it on, it made an unhealthy grinding noise before shutting down. "This doesn't look good," Miguel said, kneeling down to examine it more closely. "This model is at least 15 years old. Can you fix it?" Eliza asked, the worry back in her voice. Miguel opened his toolbox and pulled out a flashlight. "Let me take it apart first and see what's wrong." For the next hour, Miguel worked on the pump, taking it apart piece by piece. Eliza stayed with, Him, holding the flashlight when he needed both hands and handing him tools before he even asked for them. Most customers just left him to work or stood around making unhelpful comments, but Eliza seemed to know her way around machinery. "You know a lot about pumps," he commented as she correctly handed him a socket wrench. Eliza smiled. "My grandfather believed in learning every job on the farm. He said you can't manage people doing work you don't understand yourself." By midnight, Miguel had the pump dismantled and the problem identified. The impeller was damaged, and several seals were worn out. He had some generic parts in his truck that could work as temporary replacements. "I can get it running tonight," he told Eliza. "It won't be perfect, but it'll pump water. You should order proper replacement parts tomorrow." "That's all I need," she said with relief. "Just enough time to keep the plants alive until the proper parts arrive." Miguel worked for another 2 hours, his hands steady despite his exhaustion. When he finally reconnected the last wire and turned on the pump, it hummed to life with a steady, healthy sound. Water began flowing through the pipes to the irrigation system. Eliza's eyes filled with tears. "You saved my vines," she said simply. When it came time to pay, Miguel calculated the cost of the parts he'd used. "That'll be $87 for the parts," he said. "And your labor?" Eliza asked. "You've been here for more than 3 hours." Miguel shook his head. "Just the parts. Consider the labor a neighborly favor." Eliza looked like she wanted to argue, but then nodded with respect. "Thank you, Miguel. I won't forget this." As he drove home in the early morning hours, bone-tired but satisfied, Miguel had no idea that his act of kindness was about to change his life forever. And he certainly had no clue that the modest farm he'd just left was merely a small corner of an empire, or that Eliza was far more than the simple farmer she appeared to be. 2 weeks passed, and Miguel had almost forgotten about the late-night pump repair. Monday morning at the garage was busy as usual: oil changes, brake jobs, and a stubborn tractor engine that refused to start. By lunchtime, Miguel's shirt was soaked with sweat and his stomach growled with hunger. "Hey, Miguel, someone's here to see you," called Pete, the shop receptionist. Miguel rolled out from under a pickup truck he was working on, wiping his hands on a rag. Standing by the front desk was a familiar figure, Eliza, looking very different from the night he had fixed her pump. She was wearing clean jeans and a simple green blouse, her hair loose around her shoulders. She was holding a large wicker basket. "Eliza," he said, surprised. "Is the pump giving you trouble again?" She smiled and shook her head. "No, it's working perfectly. I ordered those parts you recommended and they arrived yesterday." She lifted the basket. "I brought you something to say thank you." Miguel felt awkward as Pete and the other mechanics watched with interest. He led Eliza outside to get some privacy. "You didn't need to bring anything," he said. "Really, it was no big deal." "It was a very big deal to me," Eliza replied. She handed him the basket. "Please accept this. It's just some things from my garden and a bottle of wine." Miguel peeked under the cloth covering. The basket contained fresh tomatoes, zucchini, a loaf of bread that looked homemade, and a bottle of red wine without a commercial label. "The wine is from our private stock," Eliza explained. "Nothing fancy, but it's good with dinner." "Thank you," Miguel said, genuinely touched. Most customers barely thanked him, let alone brought gifts. "Actually," Eliza continued, looking slightly nervous, "I was hoping to invite you to dinner this Saturday, as a proper thank you for saving my plants." Miguel hesitated. He rarely socialized outside his small circle of friends, most of whom he'd known since childhood. And dinner with a woman he barely knew? What would his mother say? Just a simple dinner at my cottage, Eliza added, perhaps sensing his uncertainty. "I make a pretty good pasta with vegetables from my garden." There was something about her straightforward manner that Miguel liked. No games, no hidden meanings. "Okay," he found himself saying. "Saturday sounds good." Eliza's face lit up. "Great. Around 6? She took out a small notepad from her pocket, wrote down directions, and handed it to him. "The roads can be confusing out there." After she left, Miguel endured good-natured teasing from his coworkers about his date with the farm girl. Didn't mind. It was nice to have something to look forward to. Saturday came, and Miguel spent more time than usual getting ready. He trimmed his beard, put on his good jeans and a clean button-up shirt, and even used the cologne his cousin had given him last Christmas. He felt a bit silly taking so much trouble, but something told him this evening mattered. Following Eliza's directions, Miguel drove out of town and into the rolling hills of wine country. The directions took him past the turnoff to the modest farm where he'd fixed the pump, continuing deeper into an area known for its expensive wineries and luxury estates. He frowned, checking the paper again. Maybe he'd made a wrong turn. After a few more miles, he came to a small private road with a discreet wooden sign saying, Lancaster Lane. This matched Eliza's directions, but it didn't make sense. The Lancasters owned one of the biggest wineries in the valley. Everyone knew that. Why would Eliza's directions lead here? Puzzled but curious, Miguel turned onto the private road. A small security booth stood at the entrance, but no one was inside. The road wound through perfectly maintained rows of grapevines that stretched as far as he could see in the golden evening light. After about half a mile, the road split. One branch led toward a large building in the distance that looked like a winery and tasting room. The other, smaller path led to what appeared to be a stone cottage partly hidden by oak trees. Following Eliza's instructions, Miguel took the path to the cottage. He parked next to Eliza's now familiar blue pickup truck, which looked oddly out of place in these grand surroundings. The cottage was beautiful but modest, built from local stone with a wooden porch and pots of colorful flowers by the door. Before he could knock, the door opened, and Eliza greeted him with a warm smile. She was wearing a simple sundress and looked relaxed and happy. "You found it, come in," she said, stepping aside to let him enter. The inside of the cottage was cozy and unpretentious. Comfortable furniture, bookshelves filled with books about agriculture and winemaking, and a small kitchen where something delicious was simmering on the stove. "Your directions were perfect," Miguel said, looking around. "But I'm confused. This isn't where we were that night with the pump." Eliza handed him a glass of water. "No, that was my test plot, where I try new growing methods and grape varieties. This is, well, home." Miguel looked out the window at the endless rows of carefully tended vines. "But this is Lancaster property, isn't it? Do you work for them?" Eliza's expression changed to one of slight embarrassment. She took a deep breath. "I should have been more honest with you from the beginning," she said. "My full name is Eliza Lancaster. My family owns this vineyard." Miguel nearly choked on his water. "Lancaster? As in Lancaster Estate Vineyards?" She nodded. "All 3,000 acres of it. 4 generations of my family have grown grapes in this valley." Miguel looked around the cottage with new eyes. "But I thought the Lancasters lived in that big mansion I've seen in magazines." "My parents did," Eliza said, turning to stir whatever was cooking on the stove. "After my father died last year, I inherited everything, but I prefer this cottage. It was originally the vineyard manager's house, but I converted it when I came back from college. The main house is too empty now." Miguel stood frozen, trying to process this information. The woman whose pump he had fixed, who he had charged only for parts, who had been working in the dirt in old jeans and a flannel shirt. This woman owned one of the most valuable wine estates in California. "You must think I'm an idiot," he finally said. Eliza turned quickly. "What? No. Why would I think that? Because I treated you like just a regular farmer with a small vineyard." Her expression softened. "That's exactly why I didn't tell you. That night you helped me because I needed help, not because of my name or what I own. Do you know how rare that is in my life?" She walked closer to him. "Everyone wants something from Eliza Lancaster. But you just helped Eliza." Miguel didn't know what to say. The world he had entered was so far from his own that he couldn't find his bearings. "Please stay for dinner," Eliza said. "Just 2 people sharing a meal. Nothing has to change." But as Miguel looked into her hopeful face, he knew that everything had already changed. The question was, What happened next? Dinner that evening was surprisingly comfortable. Eliza was an excellent cook, and the pasta with fresh vegetables from her garden was delicious. They talked easily about everyday things, funny stories from Miguel's work at the garage, Eliza's experiments with new grape varieties, and their shared love of old movies. It was only when Miguel was driving home that the reality of the situation truly hit him. He had just had dinner with Eliza Lancaster, the Eliza Lancaster whose family name was on wine bottles sold for hundreds of dollars, whose picture occasionally appeared in business magazines, the woman who owned land worth millions. And what was he? A mechanic who fixed cars and tractors, who lived in a rented apartment, who counted every dollar to make sure his mother's medical bills were paid. "This is crazy," he muttered to himself as he drove through the dark valley roads. Completely crazy. But despite his doubts, Miguel found himself accepting Eliza's invitation to visit again the following weekend, and the weekend after that. Soon they were seeing each other regularly, sometimes at her cottage, sometimes for a simple lunch in town, once for a walk in the hills above the valley. Miguel learned that Eliza had studied agriculture and business at university, then worked at several other wineries around the world before returning to take her place in the family business. She had strong ideas about sustainable farming and preserving the traditional methods that had made Lancaster wines famous. "The board members and investors think I'm stubborn," she told Miguel one evening as they sat on her porch watching the sunset. "They want to cut costs, use more machines, fewer people, make more wine, cheaper wine." "And you don't agree?" Miguel asked. Eliza shook her head. "My grandfather always said that wine is made in the vineyard, not in the winery. Our workers, some of them have been with us for 3 generations. They know things about this land that no machine can understand." Miguel admired her dedication, but couldn't help wondering where he fit into this world. When Eliza talked about board meetings and investor calls, about trips to wine exhibitions in France and Italy, it reminded him of how different their lives were. 3 weeks after their first dinner, Miguel was changing the oil in his car when his friend Carlos stopped by. "So?" Carlos said with a knowing smile. "Word around town is you're seeing that Lancaster girl." Miguel sighed. Small towns had no secrets. "We're friends. She's nice." Carlos raised his eyebrows. "Nice? Man, she's one of the richest people in the valley. What are you doing with someone like that?" "Like what?" Miguel asked, annoyed. "Like someone from another world," Carlos replied. "Come on, Miguel. You think someone like her ends up with someone like us? In real life?" The words stung, because they echoed Miguel's own doubts. "It's not like that," he insisted. "We're just friends." But even as he said it, Miguel knew his feelings for Eliza had grown beyond friendship. He enjoyed her company more than anyone he'd ever known. He admired her mind, her strength, her kindness. When days passed without seeing her, he found himself thinking about her, wondering what she was doing. That Sunday, Miguel visited his mother for their weekly dinner. Rosa Ramirez lived in a small house on the edge of town, with a garden she tended meticulously despite her health problems. She watched her son carefully as he ate the chicken she had prepared. "You seem different lately," she said in Spanish. "Distracted." Miguel smiled. His mother missed nothing. "I've been busy at work." Rosa said, unconvinced. "Carlos's mother tells me you've been seen with a rich girl from the big wineries." Miguel put down his fork. "Mama, let me finish," Rosa said firmly. "When I was a girl in Mexico, I worked in a big house for a wealthy family. The son of the house was kind to me. He would talk to me sometimes while I cleaned. One day his mother saw us laughing together. The next day, I was fired." "Mama, it's not the same," Miguel protested. "Eliza isn't like that." "Maybe not," Rosa conceded. "But the world is the same, hijo. People stay with their own kind. It's safer that way." Miguel couldn't sleep that night, his mother's words mixing with Carlos's warnings and his own doubts. By morning, he had decided to create some distance between himself and Eliza. It would be better for both of them. For 2 weeks he made excuses when Eliza called, He was busy at work. His mother needed him. He wasn't feeling well. Eliza accepted his excuses without question, which somehow made him feel worse. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the shop door opened, and Eliza walked in. She was soaking wet, her hair plastered to her head, her clothes dripping onto the floor. "Eliza," Miguel said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "Your phone wasn't working," she said simply. "I was worried." Miguel felt a pang of guilt. "My phone is fine. You've been avoiding me," Eliza finished for him. Her voice wasn't angry, just sad. "I want to know why." Miguel glanced around the garage. Pete and the other mechanics were pretending not to listen, but he knew they heard every word. "Can we talk outside?" he asked. Under the shelter of the garage awning, Miguel struggled to find the right words. "Look, Eliza. We come from different worlds. You run a huge business. You travel all over the world. You make decisions worth millions of dollars. I fix cars and tractors. I've never even been out of California." "So?" Eliza challenged. "So what future could we possibly have?" Miguel asked. "Your board members, your fancy friends, they'd never accept someone like me. And my family, my friends, they think I'm a fool for even spending time with you." Eliza's eyes flashed. "I don't care what my board thinks about my personal life. And if your friends judge me without knowing me, that's their problem." "It's not that simple," Miguel insisted. "Actually, it is," Eliza countered. "I like spending time with you, Miguel. When I'm with you, I'm not Eliza Lancaster winery owner. I'm just Eliza. Do you know how rare that is for me?" Her voice softened. "The question is, do you like spending time with me? Not my vineyards, not my name. Just me." Looking into her eyes, Miguel couldn't lie. "Yes, more than anything." "Then the rest is just noise," Eliza said. She reached out and took his greasy hand in her clean one. "We can figure it out as we go, together." In that moment, with rain falling around them and the smell of motor oil in the air, Miguel realized that some risks were worth taking. Some connections were worth fighting for. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but nothing worthwhile ever was. "Together," he agreed. Miguel and Eliza's decision to face the world together was tested sooner than either expected. Over the next 6 months, they settled into a rhythm. Miguel continued his work at the garage during the day. In the evenings and on weekends, he often joined Eliza at her cottage or in the vineyard. He learned about winemaking, she learned about engines, and they both discovered how their different backgrounds gave them unique ways of looking at problems. Eliza even introduced Miguel to some of the longtime workers at Lancaster Estate. Many were surprised at first to see the boss's daughter with a local mechanic, but Miguel's genuine interest in their work and his ability to fix equipment quickly earned their respect. One warm morning in late August, Miguel was at work when his phone rang. It was Eliza. "Can you come to the vineyard?" Her voice was tight with worry. "We have a problem." 20 minutes later, Miguel pulled up to the main office building at Lancaster Estate for the first time. Unlike Eliza's cozy cottage, this was an impressive stone structure surrounded by perfectly manicured gardens. He felt out of place in his work clothes, but the urgency in Eliza's voice had left no time to change. Inside, he found Eliza in a conference room with 4 men in expensive suits. Maps and photos were spread across a large table. Eliza looked up when he entered, relief clear on her face. "Miguel, thank you for coming," she said, then turned to the men. "Gentlemen, this is Miguel Ramirez, the mechanical expert I mentioned." The men nodded politely, but Miguel could feel them sizing him up, noticing his worn jeans and the grease under his fingernails. "I'll catch you up," Eliza said, leading him to the table. She pointed to several areas highlighted on a map of the vineyard. "We've discovered a fungus in these sections. It's spreading quickly." "What kind of fungus?" Miguel asked. One of the men, tall with gray hair and glasses, stepped forward. "It appears to be a variant of powdery mildew, but more aggressive than we've seen before. I'm Dr. Walker, the estate's plant pathologist. The affected areas include our heritage vines," Eliza explained. Some of those plants are over 60 years old and produce our most valuable wines. What are the options? Miguel asked. That's what we've been debating, Eliza said grimly. Dr. Walker, please explain. The doctor pointed to some photographs, showing infected vines. Option 1 is aggressive chemical treatment. Heavy fungicides applied immediately across all potentially affected areas. It would likely save this year's harvest. But, Miguel prompted, hearing the hesitation in the doctor's voice. But the chemicals would remain in the soil for years. It goes against Lancaster's sustainable practices and could affect wine quality for future harvests. What's option 2? Miguel asked. Cut our losses, said one of the other men sharply. He had a crisp accent and an impatient manner. Remove all infected vines immediately and burn them. Replant next season. That would mean losing almost 30% of our production this year, Eliza said, including our premium reserves. Better than risking the entire operation, the impatient man replied. I've seen fungus like this devastate whole vineyards in France. The board feels strongly that decisive action is needed. Miguel understood now why Eliza had called him. The board was pushing her toward a solution she didn't want. Is there no middle ground? He asked. A way to treat the infection without poisoning the soil? Dr. Walker shook his head. Traditional organic methods would work too slowly. By the time they took effect, the fungus would have spread everywhere. Miguel stared at the maps, thinking hard. Something was forming in his mind, an idea from another problem he'd solved years ago. What if we could deliver the treatment directly to the affected areas? He said slowly. Not spraying it over everything, but targeting just where it's needed? Impossible, said the impatient board member. The fungus is microscopic. You can't target what you can't see. Not the fungus itself, Miguel clarified, but the areas showing symptoms. He turned to Eliza. Remember that irrigation system I fixed for you? What if we modified something like that to deliver organic fungicide precisely where it's needed, in exactly the right amounts? Dr. Walker looked interested. That could work in theory, but we'd need specialized equipment, custom-built. It would take weeks to design and manufacture. Not necessarily, Miguel said. I have a friend who studied plant diseases at agricultural college. He's working on similar problems for small organic farms, and I can build a prototype faster than you think. The impatient board member snorted. This is absurd. We're discussing millions of dollars of premium wine, and you want to experiment with some homemade contraption? Miguel felt his face grow hot, but before he could respond, Eliza spoke up. Actually, Richard, I want to hear more. Her voice was calm but firm. Miguel, how quickly could you build a working prototype? 3 days, Miguel said confidently. Maybe 4 to test it properly. The fungus won't wait, Dr. Walker warned. We can use the current organic treatments in the meantime to slow it down, Eliza said. Just enough to buy us those 4 days. This is highly irregular, Richard protested. So is this fungus, Eliza countered. And it's my decision. The authority, in her voice, surprised Miguel. This was a side of Eliza he hadn't seen before, the business owner, the boss. The next 4 days were the most intense of Miguel's life. He called his friend Antonio, who immediately drove up from the agricultural college with his research notes. Together they worked around the clock in a barn that Eliza had converted into a temporary workshop. They built a system that attached to the existing irrigation pipes, but could deliver precise amounts of organic fungicide directly to affected plants. It used pressure sensors to adjust the flow depending on the level of infection, minimizing waste and environmental impact. On the 4th day, they tested the prototype on a small section of infected vines. By evening, Dr. Walker confirmed that the fungus was already showing signs of retreating. It's working, he told Eliza, unable to keep the surprise from his voice. The full implementation required hiring a team of workers to install and monitor the system throughout the affected areas. Miguel trained them personally, showing them how to adjust the settings and recognize when a section needed more or less treatment. For 3 weeks, Miguel practically lived at the vineyard, fine-tuning the system, solving problems as they arose, and working alongside the vineyard workers. He saw a new respect in their eyes, not just for his technical skills, but for his commitment to saving their livelihood. One evening, as the sun was setting over the rows of vines, Eliza found Miguel adjusting a valve on the main line. "The latest tests show the fungus is in retreat across all sections," she told him, her face glowing with relief. "We're going to save most of the harvest." Miguel straightened up, wiping sweat from his forehead. "That's great news. You saved this vineyard," Eliza said simply. Miguel shook his head. "We all did. Your workers, Antonio's research, your trust in trying something new." Eliza took his hand. It was calloused and stained with dirt, but she didn't seem to notice. "The board was impressed," she said. "Even Richard admitted he was wrong about you." Miguel smiled. "I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I just wanted to help." "I know," Eliza replied. "That's why it worked." The grape harvest that fall was smaller than usual, but the quality was exceptional. The crisis had been averted and Lancaster Estate survived what could have been a devastating loss. More importantly, they had done it without resorting to harmful chemicals that would have damaged the land for years to come. Word spread quickly through the wine community about the innovative solution. Other vineyard owners began calling, asking about the system Miguel had designed. Some even came in person to see it working in the fields. Each time, Eliza made sure they knew it was Miguel's creation. "You should be charging consultation fees," Eliza told him one evening as they walked through rows of grapevines heavy with nearly ripe fruit. "3 wineries have called this week alone." Miguel shook his head. "I'm a mechanic, not a consultant." "You're an innovator," Eliza corrected him. "You saw a solution no one else did." The truth was, Miguel had enjoyed the challenge more than any work he'd ever done. The satisfaction of creating something new, something that helped preserve both the land and people's livelihoods, had awakened something in him. Back at the garage, things had changed too. Pete had been understanding about Miguel's frequent absences during the fungus crisis, but now that it was over, Miguel found his regular work less fulfilling. Fixing the same cars, the same problems day after day felt monotonous after the challenges of the vineyard. One Tuesday morning, as Miguel was changing the oil in Mrs. Chen's old Toyota, Pete approached him with an unusual expression. "There's someone here to see you," he said. "A fancy type." Miguel wiped his hands and walked to the front of the shop. A well-dressed man in his 50s was waiting there, examining the shop with curious eyes. "Mr. Ramirez," the man said, extending his hand. "I'm David Turner, owner of Ridgeline Vineyards. I've heard impressive things about your work at Lancaster Estate." Miguel shook his hand, surprised. Ridgeline was a mid-sized winery on the other side of the valley, known for its innovative approach to organic farming. "I wondered if you might consider looking at an irrigation problem we're having," Mr. Turner continued. "Eliza Lancaster speaks very highly of your abilities, and we could use a fresh perspective." Miguel glanced at Pete, who nodded slightly, giving permission. "I could stop by after work today," Miguel offered. "Excellent," Mr. Turner smiled. "And please bring your invoice with you. I understand you're a professional consultant now." After Mr. Turner left, Pete raised his eyebrows. "Consultant?" Miguel shrugged, feeling somewhat embarrassed. "It's just some work I did for Eliza, for Lancaster Estate." "Sounds like it was impressive work," Pete said. "You always did have a knack for solving the problems no one else could figure out." That night, Miguel visited Ridgeline Vineyards. What he thought would be a simple consultation turned into a 3-hour discussion about their entire irrigation system. Mr. Turner had plans to expand his organic operation, but was facing water efficiency challenges. By the end of the evening, Miguel had sketched several possible solutions and promised to return with more detailed plans. When Mr. Turner handed him a check for the consultation, Miguel was shocked at the amount. "This is too much," he protested. "Actually, it's the standard rate for specialized agricultural engineering consultancy," Mr. Turner replied. "Your expertise is valuable, Mr. Ramirez. Don't underestimate it." Over the next month, Miguel took on more consultation work, always in the evenings or on weekends so it wouldn't interfere with his job at the garage. Word continued to spread, and soon he was getting calls from wineries across the valley. One, Sunday afternoon, he and Eliza were having lunch at his apartment for the first time. His place was small but neat, with family photos on the walls and his father's old guitar in the corner. Miguel had cooked his mother's chicken enchilada recipe, and they were enjoying it with a bottle of wine from Lancaster Estate. "You've been busy lately," Eliza observed. "Pete says you're hardly at the shop anymore." "I've had a lot of consultation jobs," Miguel admitted. "I'm actually thinking about taking a big step." He took a deep breath. "I might open my own business. Agricultural engineering solutions. That's what I'm thinking of calling it." Eliza's face lit up. "Miguel, that's wonderful. You'd be amazing at that." "It's a risk," he said. "Leaving a steady job, getting a loan for equipment. I believe in you," Eliza said simply. Those 4 words gave Miguel the courage he needed. The next day, he gave Pete his notice, applied for a business loan, and began converting his mother's old garage into a workshop. Rosa was hesitant at first. "Are you sure about this, mijo? A steady job is not something to throw away." "I'm sure, Mama," Miguel told her. "For the first time, I feel like I'm doing exactly what I'm meant to do." To his surprise, his mother smiled. "Your father always said you would find your own path. He would be very proud." 3 years passed in a blur of hard work and growth. Miguel's business thrived, expanding from just himself to a team of 4, including his friend Antonio, who had left the agricultural college to join him. They specialized in sustainable solutions for small and medium-sized vineyards, designing custom systems that were affordable, efficient, and environmentally friendly. Eliza, meanwhile, had firmly established herself as a forward-thinking leader in the wine industry. Under her guidance, Lancaster Estate had become known not just for its exceptional wines, but for its commitment to sustainable practices and fair treatment of workers. Several of Miguel's innovations had been implemented across the entire estate, improving water usage and reducing their environmental footprint. Their professional lives flourished, but it was their personal relationship that brought them the most joy. The differences that had once seemed so insurmountable had faded in importance as they built a partnership based on shared values, mutual respect, and genuine love. On the 3rd anniversary of the night, Miguel had fixed her pump. The night that had changed both their lives. Eliza invited him to the test vineyard where they had first met. The sun was setting over the hills, bathing everything in golden light as they walked between the rows of thriving grapevines. "Do you remember that night?" Eliza asked, stopping at the small pump house. Miguel smiled. "How could I forget? I was so tired, and all I wanted was to go home." "Thank goodness you didn't," Eliza said softly. Miguel took her hand. "I've been thinking a lot about that night, about how one small decision can change your whole life." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "I made something for you." Inside was a ring unlike any other. The band was formed from copper salvaged from that very first pump repair, carefully shaped and polished until it gleamed like rose gold. Set into it was a small, perfect grape-colored amethyst. "I know it's not a diamond," Miguel said, suddenly nervous. "But it's perfect," Eliza interrupted, her eyes shining with tears. "More perfect than any diamond could ever be." "Eliza Lancaster," Miguel said, his voice steady despite his pounding heart. "Will you marry me?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation. 1,000 times yes. As the sun set over the vineyard they had saved together, Miguel slipped the ring onto Eliza's finger. It fit perfectly, just like they did, 2 people from different worlds who had found their way to each other and built something beautiful in the process. Their wedding the following spring was a true celebration of community. Workers from the estate stood alongside Miguel's fellow mechanics. Wine industry executives mingled with Miguel's childhood friends. Rosa Ramirez, dressed in her finest, proudly sat in the front row beside Eliza's aunt. It was a day that bridged worlds and proved what Miguel and Eliza had discovered through their journey together: that true partnerships aren't built on identical backgrounds or circumstances, but on shared values, mutual respect, and the courage to see beyond appearances to the person beneath.